Good evening and welcome to Scotland at 7 here on Broadcasting Scotland. My name's Kenny McBride. The SNP launched their general election manifesto this morning as Nicola Sturgeon warned that Brexit could dominate politics at Westminster for years to come and claimed that only a strong SNP vote could enable Scotland to choose a different future. Sturgeon highlighted that the SNP is the closest challenger to the Tories in all of their Scottish seats, and so a vote for the SNP was also a vote to get Boris Johnson out of office. The SNP, of course, cannot form a government at this election, but the manifesto pledges to work to secure additional investment in Scotland's public services and to try to introduce more progressive policies UK-wide. However, Sturgeon stressed that recognition of the right of the Scottish people to decide their own future was not negotiable and that it would be very difficult to work with a party that tried to deny that right. Specific policies announced in the manifesto include an increase in English NHS spending to Scottish levels, which, using the Barnett formula, would increase Scotland's budget by £4 billion. A reversal of £1.5 billion worth of real terms austerity cuts to Scotland's budget, a plan to repair the damage of a decade of austerity at a total of £13.9 billion, an NHS Protection Act to prevent the NHS being threatened by future trade deals or see it opened up to profit-driven exploitation, and giving the Scottish Parliament the power to reject such a deal if it saw fit. A substantial increase in parental leave, including an additional 12 weeks for new fathers, as well as increases in statutory maternity and paternity pay. Ring-fencing oil and gas revenues for the next 5 years for investment into a new green energy deal. Removing Trident submarines and warheads from Scotland, saving billions of pounds, and devolution of employment and drug law to enable the Scottish Parliament to address Scotland's unique needs. Nicola Sturgeon said, "This election really matters. The future of Scotland is on the line. The opportunities for this and future generations are at stake. The kind of country we want to be is on the ballot paper. At the heart of it all, I ask people in Scotland to consider this simple but fundamental question before you cast your vote. Who should decide Scotland's future, the people who live here or Boris Johnson?" Meanwhile, Labour has obtained official documents showing that the US is demanding that the NHS will be on the table in talks on a post-Brexit trade deal. The Labour leader said that the uncensored papers gave the lie to Boris Johnson's claims that the NHS would not be part of any trade talks and revealed that the US wanted total market access after the UK leaves the EU. The uncensored documents leave Boris Johnson's denials in absolute tatters, said Jeremy Corbyn at a news conference in London earlier. "We have now got evidence that under Boris Johnson, the NHS is on the table and will be up for sale. He tried to cover it up in a secret agenda, and today it has been exposed." Corbyn said the 451 pages of documents covered 6 rounds of talks from July 2017 to just a few months ago. He said the meetings took place in Washington and London. "We are talking here about secret talks for a deal with Donald Trump after Brexit," he said. Responding to the Labour claims, the Conservatives said the documents had already been online for 2 months and were simply readouts from meetings of the UK-US Trade and Investment Working Group. The Tories accused Labour of using the documents to try to divert attention from the issue of anti-Semitism in its ranks. Meanwhile, in Scotland, the Scottish Tories have suspended a second general election candidate following complaints about anti-Muslim language. Flora Scarabello, the Tory candidate for Glasgow Central, will remain on the ballot paper as it's now too late to remove her, but the Tories have removed all support from her campaign. Ms Scarabello's suspension comes just a week after the Tory candidate in Aberdeen North was suspended over alleged homophobic, anti-Semitic and anti-Islamic comments. In Holyrood, amendments to the Scottish Government's Referendum Scotland bill were discussed today, with the Scottish Greens accusing the Labour Party of trying to undermine democracy in Scotland. Labour MSP James Kelly had proposed an amendment requiring a minimum turnout threshold to validate a referendum vote, echoing the infamous 40% rule that defeated a yes vote in the 1979 devolution referendum. Scottish Green co-leader Patrick Harvey said, "James Kelly, who was first elected to Holyrood on a 48.5% turnout, has some gall in proposing that 50% should now become the gold standard of legitimacy. Just like those who are campaigning for a 2/3 requirement for the winning side, this is just another attempt to ensure that people campaigning for any kind of change in society have less of a voice than those who support the status quo. Meanwhile, Constitutional Relations Secretary Michael Russell proposed an amendment to enable Parliament to allow a referendum question that has already been approved by the Electoral Commission to be used in a subsequent Parliament without it being tested by the Commission again. Today marked stage 2 of the bill's progress through Parliament. The Scottish Government hopes to pass the bill before the end of the year. Also in Holyrood, SNP MSP Rona Mackay today led a debate at the Scottish Parliament marking 16 days of activism against gender-based violence. 16 Days, as it is known, as it is an annual global campaign that calls for the elimination of all forms of violence against women and seeks to galvanise action to achieve that aim. The 16 Days campaign was conceived in 1991 and continues to be organised by the Centre for Women's Global Leadership. The focus of the 2019 campaign is to end violence against women in the world of work, highlighting actions to ratify the newly adopted International Labour Organization Convention 190, which aims to establish international standards for eliminating gender-based violence in the workplace. According to the campaign, 50% of all women will face violence at some point in their lives, including domestic abuse, rape and sexual assault, childhood sexual abuse, stalking, harassment, and commercial sexual exploitation. Mackay, the MSP for Strathkelvin and Bearsden, said, "Gender-based violence is a global scourge and tackling it should not be left to women. The reality is that gender-based violence is overwhelmingly perpetrated by men against women. It follows that it is incumbent upon men to call out this vile behaviour. It is a fear for all women, an international issue, and it will require an international effort to eliminate it." In China, the Reuters news agency reports today that the Chinese government has set up a special command centre to monitor the Hong Kong protest movement, after apparently losing faith in the official liaison office's ability to manage the crisis. Senior Chinese officials are reportedly stationed at the Baohinia Villa near Shenzhen, just across the border in mainland China, just as they were during the Occupy Central protests in 2014. Expressing disappointment with the liaison office's handling of the crisis, one Chinese official said, "The liaison office has been mingling with the rich people and mainland elites in the city and isolated itself from the people. This needs to be changed." The liaison office is likely to face increased pressure and protests may intensify this week, following a 90% landslide victory for pro-democracy candidates in this week's district elections, the only open elections held in the province. China is reportedly very keen to see order restored quickly, but is also extremely reluctant to intervene directly. In Malta, the Maltese Prime Minister's Chief of Staff, who resigned this week, spent last night in police custody being questioned in relation to the murder of the investigative journalist Daphne Caruana Galizia. Keith Schembri, a businessman who has run the office of the Prime Minister Joseph Muscat since the Malta Labour Party came to power in 2013, was arrested yesterday, police sources confirmed. It is confirmed he is being questioned about allegations made by the businessman Jorgen Fenech, who was arrested last week after trying to leave Malta on board his yacht, that he was a co-conspirator in the murder of Caruana Galizia. Fenech, who is himself under suspicion for his involvement in the killing, is understood to have provided evidence that implicates Schembri in the hope of receiving a presidential pardon for helping secure the conviction. Caruana Galizia's family said they were seeking an urgent meeting with the Attorney General Peter Grech in an effort to prevent Fenech from being granted a pardon. "We urgently want to clarify the situation," the family said. An official in the Attorney General's office said he would meet the family to discuss their concerns. And I would like to point out, we said yesterday that we would have our Maltese correspondent Lizzie Eldridge with us in the studio today. Unfortunately, with these new developments in the case, Lizzie has actually just taken off to go to Malta. So hopefully she will be able to join us by Skype perhaps tomorrow, and we can discuss this case in a bit more detail. Back in Scotland, the Scottish Greens have called for the reopening of a rail link between Dunfermline and Alloa, which would connect the town to Glasgow and the west of Scotland for the first time. Following the recent announcement of the reopening of the Leavenmouth rail link, the party is pushing for more historic lines and stations to be reopened to create more new low-carbon options for passengers and freight. A petition for the Dunfermline to Alloa line has been launched by Green candidate for Dunfermline and West Fife, Mags Hall, alongside MSPs Mark Ruskell and Alison Johnson. Ruskell commented, "If we are serious about tackling the climate emergency, then we need to move not just passengers, but also freight onto rail." Across Scotland, there has been a drop in the number of workers in Scotland paid below the real living wage of £9 an hour, according to figures published today. Unlike the so-called living wage brought forward by the Tory government, the real living wage is calculated independently and is based on the cost of living. The proportion of workers in Scotland earning below this floor fell from 19.4% in 2018 to 16.9% in 2019. More than 1,600 businesses across Scotland are now accredited as living wage employers, up by 300 from last year, and 83.1% of all workers earn above the living wage. This is the highest percentage of any of the UK nations. And finally, new guidance from the Scottish Government, developed by the Simon community, introduces recommendations for landlords and local authorities regarding pet owners and pets experiencing homelessness. The guidance suggests the provision of dog-friendly areas in temporary shelters, improved training for service staff to understand the importance of pets and how to work with them, standards on risk assessment to avoid problems with allergies and fears from staff, and pet-friendly policies for people to sign up to in order to access accommodation. In addition, a new homeless pet-friendly officer will work with the Dogs Trust and the Simon community to help landlords recognise the importance of pets to people experiencing homelessness. Housing Minister Kevin Stewart said, "Pets offer comfort and stability and much-needed companionship. For someone facing homelessness, it is already an extremely difficult time. Being forced to choose between their pets and a safe place to live is a choice no one should have to make." And that is all we've got time for tonight. I do again apologise that Lizzie wasn't here with us. Obviously this developing story has called her away quite urgently. We hope, as I say, to have some report on that tomorrow. Thank you, of course, for joining us. We would just remind you, as we always do, that it costs a lot of money to produce TV programmes, even one as simple as this. Just keeping the lights on, having the high-speed internet to let us stream the show. It all costs money, and anything that you can contribute to support us makes all the difference. So if you can, please do go to broadcastingscotland.scot/register. Sign up there as a supporter. Your £5 a month helps us stay on air, helps us then develop the kinds of programmes, the quantity of programmes, the quality of programmes that we can bring to you, so that we can become the kind of channel that Scotland deserves. If you're able to support us, as I say, do please support us. If you can't, don't worry. The shows will always be free to air, and we will always appreciate your viewership and support. But if you can't support us financially, then you can always tell your friends to tune in. You can force your friends to watch, send them a clip, send them a link, and hopefully we can grow our audience that way as well. We're all part of the same effort to improve the media in Scotland, so do please help us however you can. But that is all we've got tonight, so thank you again for joining me. Gordon will be back tomorrow at 7, but in the meantime, I've been Kenny McBride. Good night.